Hello friends, welcome in today's lecture. In the last lecture, we have saw the how to create a Servlet program and how to run the Servlet program. And also we have seen the one example of the Servlet. Now next see what is the Servlet API. You need to use the Servlet API to create a servlets. The Servlets API provides the interfaces and classes that are required to build the servlet. So the interfaces and classes are grouped into the two packages, that is javax.servlet and javax.servlet.htp. So there are two packages that are used to implement the servlet, and the packages is javax.servlet and javax.servlet.htp. So at the time of you performing the servlet program, you need to use the Servlet API to create a servlet, and for that you need the two packages. The javax.servlet and javax.servlet.htp package represent the interfaces and classes for the Servlet API. The javax servlet package contains the many interfaces and classes that are used by the servlet or web container, and these are not specific to any protocol. So it is not specific protocol, it is used for any protocol. The javax.servlet.htp package contains the interfaces and classes that are responsible for the HTTP request only. So the javax.servlet package is used for any protocol, and javax.servlet.htp is used only for the HTTP request. So both javax.servlet and javax.servlet.htp both contains the interfaces and classes. But the servlet.htp package are only responsible for the HTTP request. And the javax.servlet package is used to implement the servlet, and out of many other interfaces and classes defined in the package, the most important package interface is the servlet, and all the servlet must be implement this javax.servlet interface. So javax.servlet.package. The javax.servlet package contains the number of interfaces and classes that establish a framework in which servlet operate. And the classes and interfaces in this package are the protocol independent. So this is the javax.servlet is a package, and that package is used in the program for containing the interfaces and classes to perform the program. And the classes and interfaces in this javax servlet package are the protocol independent. Next, see the interfaces in the servlet. There are total 5 interfaces. First, servlet. This interface declares the lifecycle methods that all servlet must be implemented. Means servlet contains the lifecycle methods. The lifecycle of servlet point is already discussed in the previous lecture. There are 3 methods in the lifecycle of the servlet: init, service, and destroy. And these methods are implemented in the servlet interface. Next interface is servlet config. This interface allows servlet to get the initialization parameters. So this interface obtains the initialization parameters. Third interface is servlet context. This interface allows the servlet to communicate with its servlet container. So using this interface, the events can be logged. Next interface is servlet request interface. This interface provides the client request information to a servlet. So this interface is useful in reading the data from the client request. So at the time of you need to read the data from the client request. That time the servlet request method is interface is used. And last interface is servlet response. This interface assists a servlet in sending a response to the client. So this interface is useful in writing the data to the client response. It is all these five are the interfaces in the servlet. First is servlet, second is servlet config, third is servlet context, fourth is servlet request, and fifth is servlet response. See all these interfaces one by one. First is servlet interface. Servlet interface defines all the lifecycle methods such as the init method, destroy method, and service method. Okay, all the servlets method implements this interface. So some method available in the servlet interface are the first method is void destroy. This method is called by the servlet container at the end of the servlet lifecycle. So this method mainly used to destroy the memory of the allocated to the servlet. Unlike service method that get called multiple times during the lifecycle, and this method is called only once by the servlet container during the complete lifecycle. So service method is called multiple times, but init and destroy method is called only once. Once destroy method is called, the servlet container does not call the service method for the particular servlet. So the destroy method is mainly used to destroy the memory or deallocate the memory. And once you call the destroy method, then you does not call the service method for that servlet. This is all about the destroy method. Second method is void init servlet config. This method is called for the initializing the servlet, and the initialization parameter is obtained from the servlet config interface. When the servlet container startup, that happen when the web server startup, means when you start the web server, that time automatically the web container startup and it load all the servlets and initiate them automatically. After this init method get called for the each initiated servlet, and this method initialize the servlet. So simply init method is called for the initializing the servlet, and the initialization parameter is obtained from the servlet config interface. Third method is void service servlet request and servlet response. This is only a method that is called multiple times during the servlet lifecycle, and this method serves the client request. It is called as every time the server receives a request. So service time called multiple times, but init and destroy method called only once in the program. Fourth method is servlet config get servlet config. This method returns the servlet config object which contains the initialization and startup parameters for this servlet. Fifth method is java.lang.string get servlet info. This method returns the information about the servlet such as the author, version, and copyright. So if you want to information about the servlet, that time the get servlet info method is used. Okay. It is all about the servlet interface. Next, see the second interface, servlet config interface. The servlet config is implemented by the servlet container to initialize a single servlet using the init method, and that is you can pass the initialization parameter to the servlet using the web.xml deployment descriptor. For understanding, this is similar to a constructor in the Java class. An object of the servlet config is created by the web container for each servlet, and this object can be used to to get the configuration information from the web.xml file. So if you want to get the information about the configuration, that time the web.xml file is used, and that file present in the servlet config interface. An object of the servlet config is created by the web container for each servlet, and this object can be used to get the configuration information from the web.xml file. If the configuration information is modified from the web.xml file, we don't need to change the servlet. So it is easier to manage the web application if any specific content is modified from time to time. So servlet config interface is used to obtain the initialization parameter. So mainly use of the servlet config interface is to obtain the initialization parameters. See the some methods of the servlet config interface. First method is public string get init parameters having parameter string name. This method returns the parameter value for specified parameter name. So this method returns the names of the initialization parameters. Second method is public enumeration get init parameter names. This method returns an enumeration of an initialization parameter name. Third method is public string get servlet name. This method returns the name of the servlet. And fourth method is public servlet context get servlet context. This method returns the object of an servlet context. So this method returns the context for the servlet. These four are the methods of the servlet config interface. Next interface is servlet context interface. This interface is used in the servlet to log event and access the information about the environment. So this is an interface that enables the servlet to log the event and access the information about their environment. An object of the servlet context is created by the web container at the time of the deploying the project, and this object can be used to get the configuration information from the web.xml file. This is the only one servlet context object per web application. Means per web application only one servlet context object is there. If any information is shared to many servlet, it is better to provide it form of web XML file using the context param element. Next, see some methods of the servlet context interface. There is a given some commonly used methods of the servlet context interface. First method is public string get init parameter string name. This method returns the parameter value for the specified parameter name. Second method is public enumeration get init parameter names. This method returns the name of the context initialization parameter. Third method is public void set attribute having parameter string name and object. So this method set the given object in the application scope. Means the attribute name is passed to the object value. Then fourth method is public object get attribute. This method returns the attribute for the specified name. Next method is public enumeration get init parameter name. This method returns the name of the context initialization parameter as an enumeration of a string object. And sixth method is public void remove attributes string name. This method removes the attribute with the given name from the servlet context. So these are the 6 methods of the servlet context interface. Next interface is servlet request interface. The servlet request interface helps in gathering the information about the client. So this interface is mainly used to gather the information about the client. An object of the servlet request is used to provide the client request information to a servlet, such as a in that information contains the content type, content length, parameter name and value, header information and attributes. This all information present in the client request information. So this interface is mainly used to gather the information about the client related to the content type, content length, parameter name and header information, also attribute. See the some methods of the servlet request interface. There are many methods defined in the servlet request interface. Some of them as follows. First method is get parameter, having parameter is string name. This method is used to obtain the value of the parameter by name. Means using the name obtain the value of the parameter. Second method is public string get parameter values, having parameter string name. This method returns an array of a string, means it returns the array of a string that containing all the values of the given parameter name, and it is mainly used to obtain the value of the multi select list box. So it returns the multi select list box. Only single value is there, then that time the get parameter method is used, and you can return the multiple values, that time get parameter values method is used. Then next method is java.util.enumeration get parameter names. This method returns the enumeration of all the request parameter name. Next method is public init get content length. This method returns the size of the request entity data or -1 if not known. Next method is public string get character encoding. This method returns the character set encoding for the input of this request. Next method is public string get content type. This method returns the internet media type of the request entity data. Otherwise, it returns the null if not known. Next method public servlet input stream get input stream throws IO exception. This method returns an input stream for reading the binary data in the request body. Next method is public abstract string get server name. This method returns the host name of the server that received from the request. And last method is public init get server port. This method returns the port number on which this request was received. So these are all the methods present in the servlet request interface. And the last interface is servlet response interface. This interface helps the servlet to formulate the response for a client request. So main use of the servlet response interface to formulate the response for the client request. The servlet container is connected to the web server that receives the HTTP request from the client on a certain port, and when client sends a request to the web server, the servlet container creates the HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response object and passes them as an argument to the servlet service method. And the response object allow you to format and send the responses back to the client. So first time client send a request to the web server, then web server create a HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response object and pass them as an argument to the service method. And after that, response object allow to send the response back to the client. See the some methods of the servlet response interface. First method is print writer get writer. This method returns the print writer object and that can send the character text to the client. So print writer method simply used to print the message onto the client side. Second method is void set buffer size. Int size. This method set the preferred buffer size for the body of the response. Third method is void set content length, int length. This method sets the length of the content body in a response in HTTP servlet, and this method sets the HTTP content length header. Next method is void set content type, string type. This method sets the content type of the response being sent to the client before sending the response. Next method is public servlet output stream get output stream. This method returns the servlet output stream that is suitable for the writing the binary data in the response. Next method is public string get character encoding. This method returns the name of the MIME char set used. So this is the all this method of the servlet response. Here we see total 5 interfaces and its methods. Out of that methods, only commonly method mostly used in the servlet program. We have seen total 5 interfaces. First, servlet and its method, and second interface, servlet config, then third, servlet context, fourth, servlet request, and fifth, servlet response interface. Next, see the classes. Only one class we have seen in this unit, that is generic servlet class. Generic servlet class, it is a protocol independent servlet that should override the service method to handle the client request. The service method accepts the two arguments, that is servlet request object and servlet response object. So the generic class is useful for implementing the lifecycle methods such as the init, destroy and service. It implements the servlet and servlet config interface. It is called a generic because it does not assume that the protocol it will process will be HTTP. So that's why it is called as a generic. Work of the request object is to inform that servlet about the request made by the client, while response object return the response back to the client. Generic servlet is an abstract class and it has only one abstract method, that is service. So whole concept when you create a generic servlet by the extending generic servlet class, we must override the service method. So generic servlet class is a protocol independent, and in this class use only one method, that is service, and service method accept the two arguments. First is servlet request object and second is servlet response object. Next, see the some methods of the generic servlet class. First is public void init servlet config. This method is used to initialize the servlet and it indicates that servlet instance is being placed into the service. So init method is mainly used to initialization the servlet, and this method is called only once in the program. Second method is public abstract void service having two parameters, servlet request object and servlet response object. This method processes the request and provide the response back to the client, and this method will be called for every request from the web container. So service method is called multiple times in the program. Next method is public void destroy. This method indicates the end of the servlet lifecycle, and this method will be called only once. And main use of the destroy method is to destroy the memory allocated to the servlet. Next method is public string get servlet info. This method returns the information about the servlet such as the writer, version, etc. So if you want to information about the servlet, that time the get servlet info method is called. And the last method is public string get servlet name. It returns the servlet instance name defined in the web XML. So get servlet name method returns the servlet instance name that is defined already in the web.xml file. So these 5 methods of the generic servlet class. And the generic servlet class having only one method, that is service method. In the servlet program, you can write the servlet program by extending the generic servlet or extending the HTTP servlet. If you use the generic servlet, that time you use the service method, and when you use the HTTP servlet, that time you use the method do get, do post or do put. So these 5 are the methods of the generic servlet class.